Okay, so we're going to be writing an AP English essay, and the first thing we have to do is analyze the prompt. So, the prompt is, writers often highlight the values of a culture or society by using characters who are alienated from that culture or society because of gender, race, class, or creed. Choose a novel or a play in which such a character plays a significant role and show how that character's alienation reveals the surrounding society's assumptions or moral values. So the keywords here are values, society, and race. A book that fits perfectly with this prompt is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. And here the society would be the southern United States. The values we'd be trying to analyze are the racism, and since this story was set before the Civil War, this was going on at a moment when slavery was in full power. And Jim is going to be the individual, the one who is alienated. And we're going to be analyzing in our essay because he's the black person who was treated with prejudice throughout the entire novel. Okay, so let's head out to another room in the library where we can work this thing out better. Now that we have finished analyzing the prompt, we can get a good idea of how the essay should be laid out, and a good way of doing this is through a method called the chicken foot. This is simply a diagram with our thesis statement and three supporting ideas. So, our thesis statement is, events of unfairness to the character Jim show the racist values of Southern whites. Our first supporting idea is that Jim is pranked by youngsters, depicting his stupidity, and also this is also done to try to show that all African Americans were not as smart as whites. Also, our second supporting idea is that Jim is painted blue so that whites don't have to deal with the company of black people, and it shows how much they just like being around them and having them there. The third supporting idea is that Jim is re-enslaved and kept chained up like a dog, and this shows us the inhumane treatment with which blacks were treated with back then. Okay, here's our introduction. In the intrepid novel Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain integrates events of unjustness to the character Jim, a runaway slave, into the story to show the racist values of Southern whites. So this here is our thesis statement. Next we wrote, this type of alienation is purposely done to depict racism in antebellum Southern U.S. society. It is a major theme in Twain's novel. So here we talk about the theme, and this is important because it demonstrates that the prompt and the novel we chose, in this case Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, fit well together. Next, we wrote, throughout the plot, we are presented with various situations in which black people are treated or exhibited as inferior by white characters in the novel. And this last sentence just sets our essay to connect with our first paragraph. When we are first introduced to Jim as a central character in the story, he is sitting outside a porch and Huck and Tom, Huck's best friend, decide to play a prank on him. As soon as he falls asleep, they take away his hat and hang it in a branch above the tree he is sitting under. So this is simply some background information before we get into the action of our main idea. Next, we are told of how Jim tells everyone that this was the work of witches. He then expands on this and creates an elaborate tale of how witches took him and rode him all around the world. We also learn that blacks from near and far came to visit Jim to hear about his incident with witches. So this piece of text is just our main idea from the chicken foot, but expanded. We add more details, and now next we're gonna explain how this relates to how this affects the reader, and then how it relates back to our prompt. This event in the story is done to portray blacks as ignorance, people who are unenlightened and dumber than whites. The fact that two teenager boys were able to prank in a duel goes on to show how superior they thought they were. Jim is a target of this racist idea of superiority, and the fact that even youngsters are aware of this shows readers how common it is for racial prejudice to exist in the South. So let's start on the second paragraph. Another situation in which we find Jim being treated differently is when he is painted blue to impersonate a sick Arab. So here we present our supporting idea, the chicken foot idea, and then we expand on it. So blacks were viewed with such contempt in Southern contemporary society that the travelers would rather paint Jim blue. Next, we should explain how this affects the reader and then tie this in with our prompt. And our sentences should also explain how serious it was that Jim was painted blue and how this action shows that racism was very strong in the South and was a value that was supported by them. This incident tells readers just how racist people were against blacks. They were not even worthy of whites' company. It implies that if Jim were a white convict, they wouldn't have even had the thought of doing something degrading, like painting him blue and hanging a sign around him saying he was a sick Arab. This incident shows us that Southerners felt strongly about blacks and were capable of going to extreme measures to avoid having them out in plain sight. This is clearly a strong evidence of prejudice against them. Okay, our third paragraph. Near the end of the novel, Huck finds Jim re-enslaved in a farm, where he is confined like an animal. Well, I should say re-enslaved, though. We'll go back and fix that later. Huck and Tom agree to rescue him and start off by finding out where he is located. They learn from a slave that Jim is kept chained in a bed and fed by a pan. I should say by a pan. Like a dog, much like a dog is. So, once again, we put our supporting idea and then add on some details. And next we explain the severity of Jim's condition, and we explain to readers how Jim being chained up like a dog portrays the true morals of Southerners, and we try to go beyond what's obvious. I mean, of course it's bad that you're chained up like a dog. So, the condition in which Jim is restrained allows readers to find a connection between slaves and animals. Slaves were not even viewed by whites in the South as human beings, but rather as animals. This enables a reader to see the values of Southern society and understand that slavery and racism was a common aspect in their life back then. Okay, so for our conclusion, we just kind of want to restate our introduction and somewhat summarize what we wrote in our essay. So this is what we got. By depicting Jim's alienation from mainstream white society, Mark Twain gives us insight of the values that were predominant in the antebellum South. The various situations in which Jim is treated inferiorly allows readers to learn that in the South, racism was a strong element that was present in most, if not all, whites. Additionally, the unjust experiences that Jim underwent serve to show readers that slavery and racism are cruel and inhumane practices. Okay guys, thank you for listening. Also, don't forget to leave your comment below and also rate our video. And you can also follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Thank you.
I'm Mitt Romney, and I approve this message.